Hello, everyone, and thank you for attending today's Questline Digital webinar, How to Segment and Personalize Utility Customer Communications. My name is Maureen Murky, and I'm the producer and host for today's webinar. Before we begin, we want to cover just a few housekeeping items. First, if you have any questions during the webcast, you can submit them through the Q&A section, which is to the right of the presentation window. We will try to answer all questions during the webcast, but if a more in-depth answer is needed or we run out of time, they will be answered later via email. Some networks may cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off of your VPN is recommended. If your slides do fall behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. If you do experience any other disruptions during the broadcast, please feel free to use the Q&A for any technical questions as well. We will be sending everyone a follow-up email, which will include a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation and the playback link to the recording of today's webinar. We will also be conducting poll questions during the presentation and would greatly appreciate your participation. The results of those polls can also be viewed by accessing the Polls tab from the widget at the bottom of your screen. There will be a brief survey at the conclusion of this event, and I will provide further details toward the end of the webinar on completing that. Please be aware that you are not the only participant today. The names of the other attendees are not being shown to you for privacy. Now, let me introduce today's presenters. Jason McGrade, as Deputy Director of SCCC, plays a role in producing SCCC's research reports and consumer education materials. Prior to joining SCCC, Jason served most recently as a Senior Program Manager for Touchstone Energy Cooperatives. In this role, he drove strategic planning efforts, as well as leading market research and IT initiatives. He considers himself a lifelong learner and is always on the lookout for delicious local specialties when traveling. Tony Tedesco is a research manager within Con Edison Corporate Affairs. He supports marketing and other departments with insights drawn from internal and third-party data to segment key customer groups, develop personas, make strategic recommendations, and demonstrate the impact of marketing. Tony has a degree in marketing communication from Emerson College. Kristen Calvano is the marketing manager at Con Edison. She oversees marketing campaigns for Con Edison's energy efficiency and demand management residential programs. Additionally, Kristen works closely with other marketing team leads to strategize, implement, and measure marketing efforts across various channels. In today's webinar, we will hear from Jason about SCCC's research on segmentation and what findings the research has brought about. We'll then hear from Tony and Kristen at Con Ed about how they use data and personas to develop unique and successful marketing campaigns for customers. We'll then dive into a Q&A discussion to learn more. We have plenty of questions to ask, but please feel free to submit your own questions throughout the webinar. Now, before I pass it off to our speakers, let's talk a little bit about segmentation. We don't need to be in the utility industry to know just how important personalization and segmentation are, and to know how frustrating it can be when they are not used. Research shows that 74% of customers feel frustrated when content is not relevant to their interests, and 91% of consumers are more likely to shop with brands that provide those personalized recommendations or offers. When it comes to energy utilities, these wants and expectations are no different. Relevant communications are no longer nice to haves. They're critical to developing a relationship with your customers. When done right, segmentation and personalization can help your utility achieve greater customer engagement, long-term customer satisfaction, and insights into customer interests and needs. So today we're going to hear from both SCCC and Con Edison to learn about how they view and utilize segmentation to achieve all of that and more. Before I pass this off to Jason to kick us off, though, I'd like to begin today with a poll question. I'm going to shoot that out to you right now, so you should see that opening up. The question is, what communications are you currently segmenting? You can choose all that apply to you. Your options are residential customers, key accounts, electric vehicles, customer assistance, none, or other. So I will give it just a few minutes for those responses to roll in. I know that Jason, Tony, and Kristen have a lot of helpful information to share today. So wherever you are in your segmentation journey, I know you'll hear some great takeaways today. All right, those responses are still rolling in, so just going to give it another minute here. All right, and it looks like it is slowing down. Oh, another plethora. Okay, it is slowed down. I'm going to go ahead and close that poll up. So it looks like most of you are segmenting residential customers. Key accounts actually takes the lead, but then next to that is residential customers and electric vehicles as well. We did have a few say other, so I am going to go ahead and open up a second poll question. If you did select other, go ahead and provide an additional response there about what you're segmenting with, and then we'll close that up and we'll pass this to Jason. So I'll give it just a second for that to come in here. All right, and it looks like those have come in, so I'm going to go ahead and close that poll back up. And then with that, I will pass it off to Jason to get us started and tell us all about SCCC's research on segmentation. Jason, take it away.
Great. Well, thank you very much for having us today. We really do appreciate that. Always nice to be able to share what we've seen and learned in regards to customer segmentation and personalization strategies. So to get us started off, I want to give a quick overview in terms of who is SCCC. We are a nonprofit organization made up of about 150 different utility partners throughout North America. We've got folks, again, coast to coast, few in Canada, as well as one in Hong Kong. So we cover a lot of different members that are all working to better serve consumers at large. So how do we do that? Well, we listen through primary research, which we'll be talking about a little later today. We educate and share those findings during webinars, in-person events, and the like, and we collaborate. So we're always on the lookout for the thoughts, the needs, the wants, the wishes of our membership in terms of what is it that they're looking for from their consumers, what is it that they want more information from their consumers, and how can they better reach their consumers, and then in turn share those best practices throughout our membership. So to give a little bit of background in terms of the findings that we'll be sharing today, we have our Consumer Pulse and Market Segmentation Report that we do every few years. So this is the 8th iteration of this report, and prior to our information was pre-COVID. So even though that was only 2-3 years ago, it's forever in this current landscape. And so what we're looking for within this latest report was looking at what devices do consumers already own, how do they use them in managing and working with utilities on saving electricity, what is their view of their electric provider, where do they get information, how do they receive it, and looking at, again, how are consumers focused and thinking about energy today. So we did this survey earlier in the year, made up of the primary decision makers of their home, and this is how we structured this value-based segmentation. So one of the things that we want to always make sure people are aware of as we get into the research findings is sort of how we go about in this testing. How do we create this report? And one of the things that we always want to inform those that are reading this information is get a bit of understanding in terms of our implicit association testing model that we use. So it's broken out in very simplistic terms with a system 1 and system 2 level of thinking, where system 1 is that fast. How do you just immediately respond to a statement that's put forth to you? System 2 is where does that user actually put a little bit more thought before responding? And we're able to then measure, is this an instinctive reaction based off the statement, or is this something that the respondent is actually thinking about and considering, and again, providing that opportunity to change behavior as a result? So that's really what we use this IAT model around to help craft and segment the different individuals based off of our new model. For this year's effort, this is just a short set of the questions that were used in the research. One of the things that we really wanted to look towards was the attitudes and values around technology, as well as engagement with their electric provider. How much did they know about energy? How much did they want to know about energy? And where were they in that individual journey? So this year we created 5 new segments based off of these individual consumer values around again, interest in technology, use of technology, and engagement with their electric provider. So as you can see on the screen, this is a pie chart of the 5 different segments, and we'll get into a little more detail for all of these to come. But yeah, we have our Simply Sustainable group, that's our largest group, made up of 28% of those respondents, 22% Connected Pragmatics, Green Pioneers coming at 21%, followed by Trusting Traditionalists at 17%, and our smallest segmentation of Comfort Seekers. So getting into who these people are, what are the different values that they hold, and where does that fall? Our Simply Sustainable group are consumers who value the environment and are open to using technology, but haven't really fully connected to all that's out there. They've sort of done a lot of the early energy efficiency products and programs. They've done some of that. They really value simplicity in their decision making. And some of the common characteristics that we see within this demographic is that they're older, a little bit more likely to be female, and they are homeowners. Our next segment, our Connected Pragmatics. This is our younger, most young segment within our 5. They're very well educated, and they're most likely to be renters compared to some of the other demographics that we see for our other segments. This is a very tech savvy group. They're very comfortable with technology. They're very much those early adopters when it comes to new technologies, but there's a degree of urgency that's lacking for them. They're not the type that are fully engaged with their electric provider. There's something that's holding them back. And in some cases, it is because of the fact that they're a renter. So they might not have that willingness to make some of these at-home improvements given their current living situation. There might be a cost sensitivity component because, again, they're younger, they're less established in their careers, or maybe they're not planning on being in the location for very long. Again, they value flexibility, and they have a very realistic, sensible approach to how they want to engage with their electric provider. Our third segment, the Green Pioneers, this is really the sweet spot for utilities and very much the ideal consumer that you're looking for. This is a set of folks that are very tech savvy, very much willing to engage in technology. They recognize the value that it can provide and want to engage with their energy provider in terms of maximizing those home comfort, efficiencies, savings, and the like. This is a group that, again, is very knowledgeable about energy. They're usually the technology leaders. They're engaged with their provider. And again, this is the group that is definitely going to take advantage of some of those pilots, get involved, to look to some new opportunities, and a great group to market to. Our fourth group is the Trusting Traditionalists. This is an older demographic that we're seeing, most likely to be in a retired space. They're most likely to be homeowners, and they have a long time on the line. They've been in your service territory most likely for a while. So that makes them very knowledgeable about energy. They're definitely willing to engage in programs. They have a high trust when it comes to their electric provider because you provide such good, reliable service for so long. They recognize it, they see that, but they're very much overwhelmed by technology. This is a group that if you want to engage with on some of these new programs and offers, you kind of need to have that white glove service as well, or look to time of use behavioral changes, because that is an area that they're more than willing to engage in because, again, they have that trust. They trust the information that you're providing to them as their electric provider, and they're willing to engage that way. But when it comes to technology, they're a little bit more hesitant, a little bit more standoffish as a result. Our final group, Comfort Seekers, this is a group that really puts their focus on their needs first. They're not necessarily as concerned about using the technology or hitting those efficiencies. It's really about comfort and convenience to them more so than anything. This is also a little bit older of a group, a little bit more middle income and more likely to skew male compared to some of the other groups. And again, this is something that they really just value, that convenience, simple, they want what they want, and that's how it's going to be. So looking at, again, that technology, the attitudes around technology, Green Pioneers are by far and away the most comfortable with technology, followed by our Connected Pragmatics. They understand the importance and a little bit less price sensitive when it comes to adopting technologies compared to some of the other groups that we see. In terms of that electricity attitudes, again, the green pioneers and comfort seekers really strongly value the reliability of the grid, but for very different reasons. Green pioneers are a bit more environmentally motivated, whereas the comfort seekers are really driven about the comfort. They want to make sure that they always have the things that they have working, available, and being able to take part and consume when warranted. So looking at the technology in the home, again, this was a major driver for what we saw in our value-based segmentation. You can see within this, the green pioneers more likely to own these technologies compared to some of the other groups. Connected Pragmatics are right behind that. Trusting traditionalists, very little ownership of these smart devices. In terms of willingness to adopt for future opportunities, so the non-owners of these devices, again, you can see the green pioneers, they're willing to take part. They recognize that if they were to make these purchases, they would then get the benefit from that, followed by our Connected Pragmatics. So when it comes to the relationship with the electricity provider, the group that's most likely to engage with their provider is going to be that Connected Pragmatics. When it comes to trustworthiness, it's the trusting traditionalists. So it's interesting in that with the Connected Pragmatics, more likely than not, they've had some interaction with them, whether it's an outage response or just getting the service set up. So they're a little bit more likely to have that more recent engagement opportunity. Trusting traditionalists, again, they've been on the service territory for so long, they recognize the reliability that's been provided, and they have that high degree of trust as a result of that. In terms of ways to increase trust with, with the consumer, we definitely see that value around rebates, and certainly with the new Inflation Reduction Act, there's a lot of opportunity to engage with consumers around these types of opportunities for home improvements and electrification. So that's certainly something where good opportunities going forward to do some of that that outreach. In terms of the energy management journey and guiding consumers along this path, the question around what is the best source for energy efficiency information, the electricity providers is definitely coming up top, followed by the internet search. Within the different segmentation that we've seen, the green pioneers are a little bit more likely to do their own research, whereas the trusting traditionalists are very much likely to take that information directly from the utility provider. So there's definitely some opportunities to make sure that your site contains all of the information that you need for some of these programs and opportunities that consumers can take part in. But just recognize that from a green pioneers standpoint, they're going to want to trust and verify. They're going to be doing their own research. They're going to be coming at you with, I've seen the following. Can this work for my need compared to some of the other demographics like the Simply Sustainable and Trusting Traditionalists, which are more likely to just take the information that's provided on your site verbatim. In terms of that, where do they want the information? Pretty even split in terms of on bill, in the mail and email. So good opportunities for engagement across the board, very equal along most of those methods. Emails were definitely a preferred choice for pretty much all the segmentation. And as you can see here, where would you prefer to most likely to get that information? Email was number one. And there's willingness to have, dedicated emails around some of these programs as opposed to just the on-bill information. So a couple of takeaways and next steps to wrap up here. In terms of the key customer segmentation that, we really do want to encourage folks to take advantage of these opportunities to really go through the process of identifying and understanding who your consumers are. There's a lot of opportunity to gain really good insights and make sure that you're not just marketing to, everybody the same. People really do have individual values that will gravitate towards or not gravitate towards based off of those messages that are provided. If you have to pick one based off of our model, the green pioneers are that ideal customer, and that's certainly the folks that you want to really focus on first. Followed by that, the simply sustainable, they just need a little bit more education on the technology or the why for how they can use these opportunities. For connected pragmatics, it's more about developing that sense of urgency to take part or understanding what is that hurdle for why they're not engaging with this particular technology to work with the utility provider in this space. Our final two segmentations are trusting traditionalists and comfort seekers. They're definitely going to be the most difficult to engage for very different reasons. Trusting traditionalists, again, they are more likely to trust the utility provider, so you have a great opportunity to engage with them, but recognize that it's going to be through different channels, different opportunities, a little bit more white glove service to make sure that you're getting that impact. The comfort seekers, because it's a me first mentality and it's how can this be as simple of a process as can be? You really want to make sure that you're hitting those needs of how do you improve the comfort of your home? How do you improve your direct benefit to take part in some of these programs? So with that, I'll say thank you very much and turn it over to our next set of speakers.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jason. I loved hearing about all of the research you guys have done over there. Before I do pass this off to Tony and Kristen, I wanted to do another poll question. I'm going to push that out to everybody right now. Your question is, let's see, what data are you incorporating to build your audience segments? Your options are a demographic, digital engagement, content consumption, program participation, or energy use. So I will leave that open here for just a moment so that you can send in your responses. I know Jason just talked a lot about all of the amazing research that SCCC has done and the data that they've gathered and provide to utilities. So I'm excited to see what the utilities in the audience are doing and how they're utilizing data. So those responses are coming in. Keep them coming. I'm going to leave it open for just another minute. All right, it's slowing down, but still coming in. I'll give it just a second. As a reminder, you can send in a Q&A at any point in time. There is a sidebar next to the presentation window, so you can submit questions at any time, and we'll get to those during the Q&A session. All right, I'll go ahead and close that poll out. Oh, someone just sent in a final one. All right, let's close that out and let's look at the responses. It looks like most people are using program participation data. That's awesome. I anticipated that actually. Second up is demographics. That's great to see. So with that, I will now pass it off to Tony and Kristen to hear about their segmentation strategies from Con Edison. Take it away.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So before we walk through the segmentation work, go forward. Okay. Here's just a quick snapshot of our customer base. Con Edison serves the roughly 10 million people living in New York City and Westchester. We have 3.5 million electric customers, just over 1 million gas customers, and 1,600 steam customers. And we wanted to provide a little insight into what our heat pump program actually is for those who aren't familiar. The New York State Clean Heat Statewide Heat Pump Program was launched in the summer of 2020. And the program allows Con Edison residential customers to effectively address their heating and cooling needs while helping them lower their energy costs and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And to help achieve the statewide heat pump goals, our Con Edison marketing team has developed and implemented marketing strategies to create customer awareness, encourage engagement, and ultimately adoption of heat pump technology, including geothermal and mini splits, which are the two measures we're going to get into now. And I'll throw it back to Tony, who will walk us through the persona work.
Great. Thanks, Kristen. And nice to be here. So I'm on a team that does a lot of survey research and qualitative work ourselves And we get a lot of value from survey-based segmentations like SCCCs, but a limitation of surveys, of course, is that you can't survey and collect data on each customer. So to complement the research we do in-house, we've begun layering insights from third parties who are able to score a greater share of our customer database and give us the ability to create segments that are even more data-driven. This is a newer resource for the marketing department, guiding us as we improve the relevancy of our communications and get closer to that customer level personalization capability. So for this effort, we opted to partner with Experian Marketing Services. They're just best-in-class marketing data provider. They were able to demonstrate a very strong match rate to our records, and importantly, they had the endorsement from other departments within Con Ed. So I'll go into more specific details on the fields we're licensing from them, but in general, they include customer demographics, property characteristics, off-the-shelf psychographic and behavioral segments, and media channel preferences. So what are we doing with all this data? Our residential customer database has been appended with these fields. So other departments with privileges are leveraging the data in their analytic platforms. So just to share a couple of examples, we have an outreach team that frequently holds events in local neighborhoods. They now have a dashboard that allows them to look up zip code level statistics when preparing for these outreach events. So they can use data like language preference or families in the area, number of families in the area, to help fine tune their approach before they have these outreach events in communities. Another example, our team that forecasts commodities, they've begun to utilize the Experian data as inputs into their electrification models. So for instance, as they model future grid needs related to electric vehicle adoption, load growth, they can mine the propensity trends among today's current EV drivers to inform their predictions. So in marketing, we're primarily using the data to analyze the key customer segments, including electric vehicle drivers. We've also looked at other segments like solar adopters and low-income customers, and use the findings to refine our marketing strategy and act on opportunities. So the analyses we've focused on, they've tended to take the form of a persona characterizing specific users of technologies, which might be a unique methodology. We always learn something new when doing these. So next I'll summarize the personas we developed for geothermal and mini splits, explain the new segments we were able to uncover. So first, just to give you an idea of some of the data available to us, here's a snapshot from our ground source heat pump, AKA geothermal analysis. So one field I wanted to highlight is the technology adoption life cycle model shown on the left. So this field is just standard tech adoption curve, classifying customers from early adopters to late adopters. And in this analysis, it was interesting to see that, by virtue, while geothermal adopters are early adopters of small-scale residential geothermal technology, when it comes to technology in general, they're not necessarily the earliest adopters. That very first bucket, those are, you could say, that the ones that are first in line at the Apple Store when they drop a new product. Most geothermal customers, however, are comfortable with technology, and they're falling into this early majority segment. We also find it useful to compare program participants to our total customer base, which is the dotted blue line on this chart. And in this case, we're also comparing to customers nationally in gray, and that's useful. New Yorkers can be very different from the US, so including these benchmarks gives us an idea of how geothermal customers stand out. And so while they're not necessarily the innovators in tech adoption, we do see via the license data on the right that they do have an above average interest in electric vehicles. So geothermal customers live in single family homes in suburban Westchester. So these are homes that are likely to, they have higher rates of EV adoption to begin with, but comparing, we see that EV ownership rates are even higher among geothermal customers. So there's a great cross promotion opportunity between the two technologies there. Our main learning from the geothermal persona was in defining two distinct subgroups of adopters characterized here. So just for context, in our territory, despite the high upfront cost of geothermal systems, they can be a sensible choice if you're on expensive delivered fuel for heating. the payback period is justifiable. But if, like most customers in the Northeast, you're on cheaper natural gas for heating, the payback period is significantly longer, and geothermal is probably not a cost-effective solution, even after our incentives. The Experian data is definitely informative. We also learn a lot just in the process of doing these analyses and digging into the program data. And in looking at these program participants, we found that over a third of customers had previously been using natural gas for heating. They switched to geothermal despite that financial barrier. So this heating fuel data we gather internally, these are our gas customers, but the Experian data enables us to get at the why. And so in this case, we found customers that disconnected from natural gas tended to hold significantly more environmentally friendly views than those that were switching from oil. So we can presume that the environmental benefit was of renewable geothermal was a key driver, and we can target natural gas customers, prospects with green-minded messaging. And then in addition, we can segment on the common characteristics that surfaced for oil and gas customers both. So geothermal adopters are higher income, highly educated. They live in homes that are larger than average with plot sizes that are larger than average, and they tend to be more recent homeowners as well. So all of these findings, all the findings on this slide are based on the license data, and so we can build targeted customer lists filtered on all of these different dimensions. Our persona of mini-split users, meanwhile, depicts a different type of customer. So here's a snapshot highlighting some of the fields related to housing. So for mini-split participants, so these homes are much more modest than the geothermal homes, a smaller footprint and relatively lower income. So for mini-split adopters, 10% have a household income greater than $250,000 a year, compared to 34% of geothermal customers. They're also older homes, so on average built in 1942. So they likely don't have the ductwork that became more prevalent in post-war construction. So mini splits are a great solution for heating and cooling in spaces without ductwork. That made sense. The key learning here is that over a quarter of mini split installations were occurring in rental units. That was the surprise, because while not as costly as geothermal, it still seemed unlikely that renters would take on an expense like this. What we found, again, through the data was that the renters have lived in their units for almost as long as the homeowners that have installed mini splits, 12 years on average. So they're considered settled renters who would be more invested in making their space comfortable. So we assume in many cases the renter isn't the one paying for the upgrade, but targeting both long-term tenants and their landlords and property managers with messaging presented a new opportunity for us. And then this profile summarizes the traits of mini-split adopters. Demographically, they're pretty middle of the road in terms of income, education, and occupation. They do, however, significantly over-index as Asian and as Mandarin speaking. So we knew that Asian communities were greater adopters of our program, given how mainstream mini splits are in many East Asian countries, but it was really useful to quantify it here. 44% of mini split customers are Asian, compared to 13% of our customer base overall, and 21% prefer Mandarin versus 4% of CONNET overall. So the main takeaway for us is that this is a multicultural target, and all heat pump communications should be offered in written Chinese. And just to touch on a couple of other areas, there's Experian's Mosaic consumer lifestyle segmentation, which is especially helpful for adding color to these personas. So the segments that most mini split households fall into are called Modern Blend and Cosmopolitan Achievers. And some traits of these segments are supporting recycling and reducing greenhouse gases, having progressive liberal views, and being motivated by incentives to try new products. So this all certainly gives us a better idea of who the target is. And lastly, on the bottom right, you can see the media channel preference data, and that gives us a better idea of where to message the target. So like most customers, and like was mentioned earlier, the top channel is email for the channel that customers like to learn about brands through. So it seems appropriate now to hand this over to Kristen to talk about how this impacted our email strategy.
Thanks, Tony. Okay. So now I'll walk through how we utilized some key parts of these findings and integrated them into our marketing. mainly our email campaigns. So we'll start with geothermal. From July 2020, which is when we started promoting the program, up until April 2021, we were just utilizing our email list of oil heating customers to promote geothermal technology. And that list was about 23,000 people. And really, we were just basing our messaging on assumptions. We were lumping together the cost savings and the environmental benefits messaging, measuring performance, making optimizations to the best of our abilities, just like we all do. But we started seeing a decline in readership despite retargeting efforts, which alone historically we see significant engagement for, despite creative refreshes, most likely due to just message exhaustion among the market. So when our research team conducted this persona work, we were able to gain new insight into the detailed demographics of our customers who were geothermal adopters, and we appended various filters to our existing customer data like home type, mosaic segments, land square footage, home value, and we were able to create a brand new list of 13,200 gas customers. And for that list, as Tony highlighted, we focused our messaging on more of the environmental benefits. And for the previous email heating customers that we were already targeting, we really honed that messaging to focus on the cost savings benefits. So with that, we launched a new email campaign on May 19th, 2021, and that consisted of 4 total sends, 2 deployments, each for oil and gas, testing the send times, 6 a.m. versus 6 p.m., which historically have been our best performing send times. So getting into the actual performance of these emails, for the email we sent to gas heating customers between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., we saw the 6 a.m. send perform better. And you can see the metrics there. I won't walk through each, but it's worth noting that we did surpass industry benchmarks, which you can see on the lower left-hand side. We had a 1.53 CTR and 5.84% CTOR and a 26.27 open rate, even though we really don't talk about open rates anymore. And on the right side, just a snapshot of the email that was sent with click activity. And we use the subject line, an eco-conscious way to heat and cool your home. And here are the web metrics for when someone clicked from that email to the landing page environment and then clicked through to the ultimate CTA, which was reaching out to one of our participating contractors to set up an installation. A couple of metrics that jump out are the 68% of new sessions, which makes sense because this was a completely new list, and people were also clicking through to the other heat pump measure pages as well, which was great to see. And that's the screenshot there on the right. And getting into the oil heating email, interestingly, the 6 p.m. performed better than the 6 a.m. gas heating send. The metrics are below, as you can see. Again, we surpassed industry benchmarks for open rate 31.4%, CTR of 1.59%, and we were just there with the CTOR of 5.07%, just missed the 5.16 benchmark. And screenshot of the emails right there on the right. We used the subject line, a new way to save on heat and AC. And as for web performance, the 65.30% of new sessions was amazing to see, especially because we've already been utilizing this list for almost a year. So we saw a higher number of total sessions from this email, understandably, because this email list was higher than the gas one. And again, people were taking the deeper actions, clicking along to the Find a Contractor button and the other heat pump measures to learn more. And that's really it in terms of that first email deployment post that Experian data research. But I also just wanted to highlight what we did in terms of direct mail. We did utilize the geothermal persona for a direct mail postcard, 2 direct mail postcards. So around the time we sent these emails, we also sent out a direct mail, 2 direct mail postcards as a second point of contact, which were pretty much a carbon copy of the emails, same targeting strategy, same info, same imagery. So wanted to call that out as well. And finally, regarding the mini split personas, which occurred a little after the geothermal personas, we actually didn't get a chance to utilize that for marketing because that specific program offering was overperforming. And we eventually started to wind down our marketing for mini splits. But worth noting that we were only targeting single family homeowners to promote mini splits, but through these new findings, we learned that 26% of mini split adopters are renters, like Tony mentioned. So that is something that we will definitely take back once the program relaunches in 2023, is expanding our target to renters as well as homeowners. That concludes what we have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kristen and Tony. I loved hearing about Con Edison's approach to segmentation, and all of the data you were able to pull is honestly amazing. And the way you utilized it is awesome. So thank you so much for sharing. I know I'm eager to learn more from our Q&A session, but before we get to those, we do have one final poll question. So I will push that out to everybody right now. Your question now is, what challenges are preventing your utility from implementing a segmentation strategy? Your options are: cannot access data, data is not clean or standardized for use, you don't have the marketing tools to deploy segmented campaigns, you don't see the value in segmentation, or segmentation is not appropriate for your campaigns. So go ahead and select which option suits you best, and then we will go ahead and move over to Q&A. As a reminder, you can send in your questions at any time through that Q&A widget on the side. So we'll be getting to that right after this poll question. So send those in. We'll have a lot. I'll leave the poll up for just another minute here. Okay, it looks like it's starting to slow down here. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll. If you're trying to get it in one more time, send it in right now. And I am closing the poll. All right, so the answers here, it looks like it's pretty much evenly split, honestly, between the top 3. So either can't access data, data is not clean or standardized for use, or you don't have the marketing tools to deploy segmented campaigns. So a lot of things there. Hopefully some takeaways today will maybe help push those segmentation forward with your utility. So now I'm going to invite all of our speakers back onto video, and we'll start with our Q&A. All right, there we go. We'll just have Kristen pop on. But Jason, I'm actually going to go ahead and start with you, if that's okay. Mm-hmm. So my question for you is, how did SCCC know where to start with its segmentation survey? How did you know what questions to ask?
Sure. So as mentioned, this is the 8th iteration of this effort. And basically what we do every 2 to 3 years, we go through and identify through our workings with our membership, what are the types of things that commonly are seen? What are the common questions that we're seeing with consumers and how they engage with their electric provider? So in the past, we were very focused on some of the environmental concerns that relate to how individuals fall into the various segmentations. We saw that as a big driver. But more recently, more and more consumers are willing to take action when it comes to meeting utility efforts, decarbonization goals, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So we're starting to see less and less of that being a true value-based driver, but the rise of technology really being more so that factor. as to where you would put the different individual based off of that value-based segmentation. So again, what we do, we're regularly looking to make sure that we're keeping on that pulse of consumers. And so within this last set, it was those two drivers of willingness to engage with their electric provider and willingness to use technology that we saw really shake out as those different value-based identifiers for our segmentation efforts.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Kristen, this question is for you. It asks, what are your biggest challenges when deciding how to segment your communications?
I think it's knowing exactly where to start. We're presented with all of this great data. So the question is, what exactly is the best way to adapt this for our communication? I think we took a really good approach with deciding to segment oil versus gas because there was such a clear distinction and differences between the two customer groups in terms of what their priorities are and what they're interested in. So we were able to separate the messaging where it was different enough, where customers were going to relate to it more than just an overarching type message.
That makes sense. Thank you. And thinking about the data more, Jason, when you started the research, I'm sure that you and others at SCCC probably had some hypotheses as to, how the results would unfold. So with that in mind, did the results surprise you? Did they not surprise you? Did the 5 new segments, were those kind of what you were anticipating?
So, we always go in to these efforts with trying to minimize those types of assumptions and let the data kind of play out as it needs to. What we did think going into this was, where was that technology driver going to shake out with individuals, where we were seeing more and more within our other research efforts that, again, willingness to adopt technology or to not being such a big factor in consumer habits and change within the home as individuals go towards electrification or stay in a status quo position. So that was something that we thought was very interesting to see how much of that impact came about with our Green Pioneers being that group that really wanted everything and was engaging with all of these different things and being willing to take part in these new pilots around smart technology to further improve their home comfort and efficiencies, and less so with some of the other segments that, again, we're a little bit more hesitant, a little bit more less willing to adopt the technology, because we see it within the industry. There's so much new opportunity from these smart technology devices, but if a consumer is not willing to take part or willing to engage with it, it really derails individual strategies for getting that adoption, getting those things in place, leveraging the technology to benefit both the consumer and the utility. So making sure that you have that path forward to identify which consumers are willing to take part and how to engage them if they're not willing to take part in smart technologies. We really did see that as a very key strategic goal for this research, and in turn helping to inform our utility membership.
Awesome. I love that you said that you let the data speak for itself. I think that's a great way to look at that. Tony, kind of similar. I'm wondering if you have any kind of other opinions or thoughts on that matter, but I was wondering, when Con Ed started its research on the personas, did the results surprise you, or is it kind of similar of letting the data just see where it unfolds?
So I think each time we do a persona where we have some surprises, hopefully surprises that are actionable. And so I already went over the ones with geothermal. It was the fact that natural gas customers were installing at such high rates despite the economics, and with mini splits, the fact that so many were going into rental units. Just as another example, we've done a persona of solar adopters in our territory, and we had some assumptions. We thought, just assumed solar customers were likely living in very large single-family detached homes, high income, motivated by the environment. But it turns out that most of these assumptions weren't exactly true. They, a lot of these, the learning was that a lot of these solar installs are actually going in multifamily buildings, smaller multifamily buildings, but that the driver for the customers were, they were very financially motivated and financially savvy. So they're doing all that research, like one of the segments that SCCC mentioned, and making a decision based on the finances. So that was very interesting and a surprise for us. We don't offer solar at Con Edison ourselves, but certainly want to promote the opportunity to our customers. So that was useful. But there's always a surprise. Our team, market research, needs to let the data speak for itself, but always collaborating with marketing to act on it.
Great. Yeah, hopefully the surprises are good surprises, right? That's what we want. Awesome. This question I'm going to actually push out to all of you. Christian, so maybe if you want to just start. But the question is, where should utilities start? What programs or campaigns can they start segmenting to maybe see the biggest impact?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say look at your biggest priority programs and offerings and see where the biggest opportunities are. I think it was great in our case. We have, a really large set of residential customers. So I just kind of take a holistic look at your portfolio and really kind of decide where are the priorities and what are the best opportunities, do you think, in terms of segmentation?
Yeah, that sounds great. Jason and Tony, either of you want to kickstart that next?
Sure. So I would add to that in really being mindful of your consumer data, where you really want to make sure that you are sending the right messaging to the right groups of individuals. You don't necessarily want to send the type of messaging to a renter that would require, a large, retrofit type project that they may or may not be able to apply in their home. I thought it was fascinating to hear from the Con Ed team about some of those long-term renters and being willing to take part in that change. But that is something where you're, again, still identifying this is someone who's been in that home for a while and be willing to take some of those opportunities. If it's more of a transient area, that's not necessarily going to potentially have that same type of impact. Same thing with, again, leveraging some of these smart technology opportunities. If a consumer is not, doesn't have these devices to begin with, or is not interested in pursuing these devices, there's better opportunities out there to make sure you have that right match for the program.
Yeah, makes sense. Tony, I'll just make sure. Do you want to say anything, or should I move to the next question?
I was just going to add that I do think in terms of a starting point, it's also important to keep in mind the particularities of your service territory. So you already touched on it, but for us, rent own is a very high level and a low hanging fruit in terms of segmenting. So 2/3 of our customers are renters. So just being able to identify who is a renter, which we weren't really able to do until just a few years ago, is very helpful and an easier starting point maybe than filtering all these other data points that we covered.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right. So this next question is going to be for all of you as well. Jason, I'm going to go ahead and start with you, though, for it. The question is, are there limits to personalization? Are there any programs or campaigns where personalization is not appropriate?
Sure. So that's a great question. So one of the other research efforts that we did this year focused on sort of the state of the consumer and different themes that we identified in terms of what consumers are looking for from their utility provider. And the concept of personalization definitely came up. And that's something where consumers really are expecting a level of personalization because they see it with so many other activities and products and services that they currently engage with. The Netflix suggestions, the banking alerts of possible fraudulent activity, there are so many, suggested things that come up in social feeds and, while doing online shopping of you might also like. So consumers are expecting that to a certain degree and are willing to have that benefit provided from their utility provider where it's beneficial to them. So if it's a situation where you're sending out an alert letting people know about peak demand, that's certainly something that they can gravitate to, understand this is going to cost me money, so they're related to that. Or an opportunity of hey, we're seeing some irregularities with some of your appliances. If you really go back to that behind the meter data and have those opportunities to leverage those smart technologies to better provide insights to the home, consumers want that. They want to be able to get that value, that benefit where they can. So it's not the creepy factor of Big Brother and big data that is scaring some of these people off when the alert directly benefits their bottom line, their needs. Consumers really respond very well to that.
Awesome. And Tony, from your kind of analytical side with Con Ed, what do you think? Do you think there's limits to personalization?
So I think, yeah, that's very important to keep in mind. And obviously with our third-party license data, our chief privacy officer is, part of that. And so definitely buttoned up there. Just a different perspective on the question. I think just from a execution standpoint, there are limits to personalization. So this summer, so we have a sort of a mindset, values-based segmentation of our own customers, similar to the SCCC one, just unique to our territory. And naturally, there is a segment out of the 5 segments that is this the strongest to adopt energy efficiency and other clean energy measures. So we did a test with that top segment using Facebook, and we did a test group with characteristics of those of that segment versus a GenPop test. And naturally, the targeted group did perform better on the ad metrics and the web metrics, but it was much more expensive. So it's very useful for specific programs with a call to action, like this electric vehicle test, where we're asking electric vehicle drivers to enroll into our rewards program. But for more generic, and so those lower funnel metrics, I think personalization is great there and actionable there. But for more higher level, higher funnel metrics, there might be limits just in terms of budget and resources.
Yeah, absolutely. Kristen, I'll just pass it to you before I pass off to the next question.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a time and place, and if it's an overarching type message, it doesn't really require a firm call to action. I think it's, again, kind of measuring the benefits versus not. If we're trying to get customers to perform a certain action, like absolutely, people at the end of the day, doesn't matter what field you're in, everyone wants to feel like they're kind of special in a way. And feel like they're like the message is being personalized for them. So
absolutely. All right, well, we are running out of time, so I'm going to wrap it up here with a final question. We're going to talk next steps with each of you. So Kristen and Tony, what do you guys have in the pipeline for segmented and personalized communications? How do you anticipate your strategy evolving? And then Jason, how can energy utilities use this research that you've just shared with all of us to their advantage? Kristen, I'm gonna aim at you right now. Go for it.
Yeah, so Tony can speak to some of the more other personalization or segmentation that we're planning, but up until now we haven't really utilized the personalization as much as the segmentation, but this is kind of opening the door to that opportunity. So yeah, like I said, when this program gets back up and running in 2023, there's definitely more opportunity. We'll utilize that mini split persona data, and we'll look to use that to personalize more of our messaging. And the more we branch out to the other programs, same thing.
Can't wait. Tony, you want to hop in with anything else there?
So it's definitely going to continue developing those program participation personas, but something else that's exciting for the future is integrating this data into a enterprise-wide analytics platform that we're setting up. So that'll give even more users the ability to access the data and run their own reports and do their own analysis. So that self-serve function, sort of democratizing the data throughout the company is sort of where we're headed.
Awesome. Can't wait to see both of those. And Jason, I'm going to shoot over to you. Wrap us up. How can utilities use this research?
Sure. So if they're a member of SCCC, they actually have the ability to take our question set for their own segmentation surveys. So that's certainly available to our members in that space. Otherwise, we will be using this framework for future research projects. So we've got an energy rate structure research project that we're going to be releasing later this year that uses these segments to show how different consumers want and need or understand the different rate structures that are out there from a utility standpoint, as well as a couple of white papers tied to examples of how to best communicate and do outreach strategies for different programs related to our different segmentations.
Awesome. Thank you so much. All right. So we have run out of time, unfortunately. Thank you so much, Jason, Tony, and Kristen, for all of your insights and advice today. This was an amazing session. I have a lot of takeaways, and I'm sure our audience does as well. Thank you, audience, as well, for joining us today and for all those questions. As a reminder, the presentation materials and the playback link to the recording will be emailed to you. If you have any additional questions or feedback, please don't hesitate to contact us. There's also going to be a brief survey at the conclusion of the event. Don't close out your browser window. We would really appreciate your feedback. Our next webinar will be November 17th about 2023 email marketing best practices and trends. We're looking ahead to the new year. So register today on our website. And with that, thank you again, everyone, for attending, and have a great day.
There you go.
Thank you.